Hello dear viewers of my channel. This is a new retelling of the manhwa. Here is a guy who was lucky enough to get into this video, and if you also want to get a chance to get into this video, then write something in the comments. And I want to thank you all for your support. Only thanks to her I find the strength to make videos. Thank you all, and enjoy watching. Cheng Yan, that was the name of the main character, who was a brilliant engineer, so it was until he passed out during a robot, then woke up he found himself in the world of the Middle Ages and became a real prince. The protagonist decided to behave according to his new status, but this world was different from the one he lived in before. In this world, witches really existed, and they had incredible powers that made people hate them. Cheng was incredibly angry at the people because of such cruelty, because he could use the power of witches for the benefit of all people. It was then that the protagonist ordered his men to free the witches. He decided to go against the foundations of this strange world. The girl was angry that the prince was going to hire her. She warned that the guy could die. He looked at the witch and promised a flexible schedule, and many other privileges that an employee can only dream of. The girl happily enjoyed her meal. Drawing on his knowledge of engineering and the witch's supernatural powers, he decided to develop this world. Cheng saw great potential in the strength of witches. They could be useful for countless directions. That was the reason why the prince wanted to get himself all the witches in this world. A girl approached him and noticed that from the outside the harem preferences of the prince looked very fickle. He said that he had no time for such nonsense. The prince said that his burden is very heavy, because now people work a lot and hardly eat. He turned to the people. He said he would do anything to solve their problems. Every winter they were attacked by terrible demons, which the prince also had to figure out how to fight. He also had brothers, one of whom had incredible fighting skills, the other had incredible wealth, but his sister had great military power, the other sister had incredible intelligence. The girl interrupted the guy and said she was happy to see such a lonely man in front of her. She was rapidly approaching his face and started to whisper something in the guy's ear, but they were interrupted by another witch who complained that she should be first. The prince stopped the girls and said that this was not how it should happen. He grabbed his face. He was losing his composure now. He wasn't going to repeat the mistakes of the past, and this time he decided to take his health more seriously, because he didn't want to die like last time from recycling. It was a short about what will happen in this story. If you support this video, then I will start to steadily make a continuation, because the chapters in this story is really a lot. Anyway, I'll continue the story. The guy did not understand what was happening. He heard unfamiliar voices that appealed to some prince. Suddenly he opened his eyes, and it turned out that he was sitting on the throne. He did not understand what was happening, because just now he was at work. The prince looked towards the girls who were gossiping about something. He didn't realize where he was, and inside he was still worried about not being able to hand in his work in time. The old man turned to the prince. He said that it was time to start the execution and asked the prince to authorize it. The guy stood in bewilderment at this situation, as suddenly his body was pierced by a terrible pain, after which he instantly realized who he was, namely the prince himself. He was now the fourth prince of the Grey Castle Kingdom, named Roland Wimbledon. When his father was choosing an heir to the throne, he gave his children lands and said that the one who would rule best would get the throne. At the time, Roland wasn't very interested in all this, and his father said that he would keep an eye on his children's achievements for all 5 years. He also added that the fight between them should be fair. Roland said that it was nonsense, because originally not everyone was on equal footing. For example, the first prince had incredible strength and skills, the second prince had great wealth, the third sister had great military power, and the fifth sister had incredible intelligence. But he was a useless prince who loved to execute people in public and was nothing. He remembered the city he ruled and was horrified at what he had to do anything. The old man reminded him again that it was time to start the execution, because everyone was waiting for his word. Roland remembered that he was in this place to carry out the execution of the witch. A huge number of people were standing around waiting for the upcoming spectacle. Everyone hated this girl, just because she was a witch, and everyone wanted to see the moment of her death, while the protagonist thought that it was terrible and it should not be. The guy hit the old man because he was angry that people are throwing all their troubles on harmless girls, and then the prince ordered to release the witch. The old man didn't understand what was going on, and other people were just puzzled and didn't understand what the protagonist was thinking. He looked at all these people with a cold look, and then said that he was simply tired and wanted to postpone it all for another day. The old man began to beg the prince to change his mind, but the guy remained indifferent. The head of the knights also decided to speak out. He asked the prince not to joke. The knight said that as soon as the witch was revealed, she should be executed. Otherwise her kin would come to free the girl. At that time the prince did not understand why the knight, whose arm was bigger than most people's bodies, was so afraid of the girl's escape. The protagonist said that in any case they would be able to catch them more, and headed to the chambers to rest. The knight cringed at such words. The prince's temporary residence was the southern castle, which looked pretty bad. Roland closed the doors right in front of the knights, leaving them outside. The guy, on the other hand, stood in the room leaning against the door. He exhaled and thought deeply about how he should act. He was actually excited because it had been an incredibly long time since he had interacted with so many people. He had finally realized a simple thing, namely that he had died of overwork and had been reborn in another world in the body of a prince. He looked carefully at his hand. He was serious about making life in this town a lot better. From now on he considered himself Roland, and now he wanted to find out more information about witches. The prince went to the prison with the knights, who discouraged him from doing so, because it was dangerous. He talked about how even with the witches' powers contained, they could not be completely safe. At that time the prince joked that the head of the knights was so much afraid of the girl. At that time the man began to shout that she was the spawn of a demon, which only made the prince cringe. They continued walking, and the hero thought about how such a man could be such a blabbermouth. Suddenly the prince stopped. He had arrived at the place where this girl was locked up. She got to her feet, and then began to stare intently in the direction of the protagonist. Roland asked the girl to come closer so that he could see her. At that time, the main knight jumped up hysterically, begging the protagonist not to come closer. Roland grabbed the knight by the shoulder and ordered him not to be nervous. He approached the girl and asked her for her name. The knight continued to get hysterical. He said that the girl was a demon, and that she could easily bewitch a guy. The protagonist had to knock the knight on the head to finally calm him down, and then he asked if the girl could tell him what really happened on the northern slope. A look of sadness appeared on her face. The prince assumed that the girl did not want to talk about it, but she replied that she would tell him everything. She told how her father was working in the mines, and during the work he was hit by rocks. At that time another miner decided to take the opportunity to steal from the man. That's when the other guy saw it and accused the thief of stealing. The girl was very worried about the guy because he was her uncle, while the thief wanted to kill the man. The girl asked him to stop and held out her hand. Then her eyes began to glow, and a moment later when she woke up on her face appeared fear, because in front of her lay the corpse of the thief, who looked as if he had just been in the sun. Her relatives were very frightened by her strength, but she did not understand how it could happen. They left the mine, and on the way home the girl begged her uncle not to tell anyone what he had seen. In the present, she ended up in jail. The prince assumed the girl had been snitched on by her uncle, but with an incredibly sad look she said it wasn't him. It turned out that it was none other than her own father who had denounced the girl. Suddenly the old man started shouting that the witch had confessed and should be executed, while Roland said that he was not going to do that. On the contrary, he wanted to see the girl's power. The girl asked if the prince wanted to see the demonic power. The boy came even closer and said that he did. The girl said that because of the medallion around her neck she can't use her power. The girl asked if the prince would remove the medallion if he wasn't afraid of dying at her hands. Roland instantly grabbed the medallion and pulled it with all his might, which caused the girl to move, and the chain that held the medallion around the girl's neck broke. She looked at the protagonist with an uncomprehending look, who was as confident as possible and told the witch to use her power. He looked at the girl carefully and once again asked her to start. She started to look a bit creepy. Then her body began to be covered with flames, and eventually her whole chamber was filled with flames, which surprised the protagonist, because something like this he sees for the first time. The flames were so bright that the prince had to close his eyes. Suddenly the reaction of the protagonist changed to misunderstanding, because the girl with her flame was able to melt the bars, because of which the knight instantly reacted and pushed the protagonist away, because it was dangerous. While the guy was incredibly interested and asked if this was the witch's power. The grid continued to melt, after which there was no defense between the witch and the protagonist, and the knight ordered the witch to stop. The girl's clothes, on the other hand, began to disintegrate, but she looked incredibly confident. At that time, the protagonist realized the words that the fire would not harm her. Looking at the girl, it seemed as if she was fire itself. The smoke began to dissipate a little at a time, and the guys didn't realize what was about to happen. At that time, the main character was incredibly happy that there is magic in this world, because it will incredibly help in the development of mankind. The girl asked if she had quenched the prince's curiosity, and then asked if she would finally be killed. At that time, Roland began to approach, taking off his jacket, and then threw it towards the girl, and she was covered by his clothes. She was shocked by this act, while the protagonist held out his hand and said that he intended to hire the girl. The protagonist thought that the powers used by witches are incredible, for they bypass the laws of physics. At the time, the old man seemed incredibly angry over the protagonist's words. He was very frightened and said that she would easily kill them. At that time, it was no problem at all for the prince. The old man said that in that case they would go against the church, and the witches themselves would go against them. Roland just asked the old man to bring a copy of the employment contract, but he didn't understand what the guy was talking about. The prince said he was going to formally hire Lady and for the service, and at the time she didn't understand what was going on. A little while later, in the afternoon at the castle, Roland asked if the old man had done what he ordered, and he said that they had initiated the witch's death, adding that the fact that the prince had saved the witch was a huge risk for them. The protagonist said that the old man should not doubt his decisions. In his opinion, witches are not monsters or demons. The old man tried to object, but the protagonist could not be persuaded. Roland asked how things were going in the border town, and the old man said that they were not very good. The protagonist said that the city was very vulnerable, and then added that how could he defeat his relatives. The old man fell silent in bewilderment. At that time, the protagonist answered his own question, because the chance of victory is simply 0. For this reason, Roland decided to change tactics. The old man listened attentively to the lord and admired the prince, and Roland ordered to bring Anna. At that time, there was a lot of steam in the bathhouse. It was the maids who washed the girl in the bath. The girl was told that the prince wanted to see her and was ordered to put on a working outfit. She was very embarrassed by this outfit. After that, she went to the castle. She went to the prince, not realizing what awaits her next. The protagonist arrived at the new building that he had built especially for Anna's training. The knight reported to the protagonist that Anna had arrived. He looked towards the girl who was wearing a very cute outfit, but it was the outfit that made her incredibly embarrassed. The guy approached the girl, and then he confessed that the outfit looks great on the girl, and he did not make a mistake with the choice. The prince asked if Anna was comfortable in the outfit, but she clenched her hand into a fist and asked why the protagonist had taken someone like her. She said she was a witch who hurt all the people around her. She didn't understand why the guy wasn't afraid of her. In the past, she started to be abused by her own father. She was hated by everyone just because she was different, which caused sadness on this pretty girl's face. Suddenly, her gaze regained life after the hero said that he was not afraid of her. He said that he did not believe in this nonsense with demons. He believes that people are always afraid of what they cannot understand. The protagonist held out his hand and said that he also can't say where this power comes from, but he is sure that she uses it. The girl gave her hand to the prince, after which the hero promised to teach the girl how to control her power to the fullest. They went inside the building. The girl was covered in sweat and breathing heavily. Roland asked the girl if she could continue practicing. Flames began to appear near her feet, which after a moment covered her entire body. Roland realized that controlling the flames was not easy, while the girl was concentrating on her flames with all her might. Suddenly she fell to her knees and screamed that her clothes were burned again. The protagonist had foreseen this and had prepared enough outfits for training. Suddenly an old man arrived and started talking about an urgent report. The knight told that they had discovered traces of demons, and that the months of demons would come very soon. The girl was shocked, while Roland didn't understand what it all meant. Roland had no idea what the demon months were. While the girl was shaking, at that time the old man began to tell that as the day gets shorter, somewhere the gates of hell open. He said that since their city is very weak, all the inhabitants at the time of this month go to another. The protagonist asked if the old man had seen the gates of hell personally. He said that it was impossible for him, because there were a huge number of monsters on the approach to the gates, and he would have been killed instantly. The old man said that witches are able to see the gates, and they are not affected by their charms. The protagonist asked about the demonic beasts. He was sure that the old man had seen them before. He said that he had not seen monsters either, since he lived with the hero in the castle. The protagonist realized that, with such campaigns, this town didn't even stand a chance. The protagonist assumed that the demonic beasts weren't so strong that they could be stopped in another city. But the old man said that they didn't have huge walls or elite soldiers, they simply couldn't defend themselves. Roland didn't understand why they had to build a city in such a terrible place. The prince ordered the old man to gather all the men, guards. A little while later, on a clear day, the prince sat with the girl and sipped something in a glass while she nibbled on a cake. He asked Anna to tell him about the demon months, and she agreed. She told him that unlike the nobles, ordinary people suffer from it every year. It's a real nightmare in which only death reigns. She also told him that her father had lived a hard life like everyone else in this city. They move all their supplies to exchange them for food and some gold, so they have to take shelter in that place until the end of winter. She said that there were times when demons went for 4 months, and all the ore was exchanged only for food for 3 months, and told people to go and mine more to get food. Since the supplies were distributed equally, strong tried to take supplies from the weak. It was for this reason that a great number of people simply did not live to see the end of the demon month. Roland looked at the girl with a sympathetic look and assumed that she was having a hard time. She said that her father had always protected her, and then they sat in silence for a while. The girl said that he had gotten 25 gold pieces for her. It was necessary to prolong his life. The prince pounded his fist on the table and then said in a stern voice that he would never let something like that happen again. He looked at the girl and said that was his promise. The main character said to bring the old man as he needed to know how everything was going. At that time, inside the royal chancery, the protagonist asked if the guys they were looking for were the ones. They were the 2 guards in charge of the signal fire, as well as a man who had personally fought demons and killed one of them. The knight panicked and said that the demons would be arriving soon, while Roland asked what the demons looked like and if they could kill them. The soldier said that it was indeed possible to kill them. They were ordinary beasts that had gone mad because of the gate. The voice of a hunter was heard, who decided to shock everyone by saying that the enemies were not scary at all, and he could easily kill 2 of them. He said that he had already killed 2 demonic beasts once before. After that, he knelt down on one knee in front of the prince. At that time, the hero thought that such an aura could only be possessed by a person who had actually killed demons. The old man said that he was a famous hunter. The hero began to ask the hunter about the demons he had killed, and he said that he had killed a type of wild hog and a subspecies of wolf. The word species interested Roland. He said that this is how they characterized the demons, because they used to be animals, but because of the devil's miasma they became mad and gained power. A subspecies of wolves are becoming more cunning, and to kill them a trap must be prepared in advance. But a subspecies of wild hog have a very strong skin. The protagonist realized that each time the strong become stronger and the fast become faster, but he continued to consider them just animals. The man grabbed his clothes and said that they were not the worst enemies, then showed his scar and said that the worst were mixed species. He said that such creatures were the very embodiments of the devil. He only once met such a creature. It was incredibly strong, could fly, and could easily find him anywhere, and he only miraculously managed to save himself. The protagonist thought about the fact that this world reminded him more and more of fantasy. He thought that walls could help against ground creatures but not against air creatures. The hero assumed that mixed species were rare, and the knight confirmed that they were. There could be at most 3 or 4 of them in a whole winter. The prince thought about what to do in this situation. He jumped up abruptly from his seat, then said that he decided to stay in this city. That caused a deep misunderstanding among his subordinates. The knight instantly began his hysterics and began to beg to change his decision. The protagonist said he could make the wall. The knight said it was impossible because they didn't have that much time. Roland promised the knight to leave if he couldn't make the wall in time. The knight fell on his knee and said he would protect the protagonist even at the cost of his own life. At that time, in the blue water port, the protagonist's sister noticed that the water was getting colder and realized that winter was just around the corner. She inquired when their fleet would return back. whereupon the servant said that the fleet would arrive at the port in 3 days. She also added that this was their last time at sea for the year, and hoped they would surprise her. She said that gold in a cupboard was as worthless as stone, but that it was only by spending it that it gained its true value. At that time, a soldier asked how the girl had been able to foresee the fight before the king announced it. She said that she had never imagined her father would do something like this. She said that the servant should have realized after he saw her plan. Thanks to the plan they are robbing, from which they do not raise taxes, they have a lot of experienced warriors and sailors. The girl was the third princess who had just a colossal military power. The girl asked about the poison plan. It turned out that the protagonist tried to poison her, but their plan failed. The girl was disappointed that a weakling like Roland could survive her trickery. The boy talked about the fact that they were informed that the prince had definitely drunk the poison pill. The girl said that she didn't need any explanations, failure is failure. She said that as soon as her brother was in the fortress, they should take advantage of it. Then she asked what the alchemist who created the pill said. The soldier said that he hadn't heard from the alchemist, and the girl instantly ordered the poor man to be hanged. In the past, Anna was sitting on a bench and reading something. A man in church clothes came up to her and asked what the girl was reading this time. She greeted her teacher with a wide smile on her face. Suddenly memories began to crumble and sprinkled like broken glass. The man opened his eyes. He didn't look very good. He was standing in a crowd of people who were shouting and demanding the witch's death. He turned around and watched with horror in his eyes as the girl weighed on a noose, unable to move. The priest punched himself in the face and started screaming. Then he woke up in his office. He felt just awful. It wasn't the first time he had this dream. The man was incredibly angry. He thought that this sweet girl was not as evil as the officials who had caused the theater to collapse and take many lives. He thought that it was those people who should have been hanged, not the innocent little girl. He was incredibly angry because the officials had gotten away with it, and once again the common people had suffered. There are a huge amount of problems in this city, and all the government did was hang an innocent little girl. He looked out the window. He was beginning to wonder what the true evil was. Suddenly he heard someone's footsteps, and then the girl told the teacher that she felt that something was wrong with her body. She was very worried that she would be hanged just like Anna. The man promised the girl that he would protect her and added that she would get better. He walked down the street full of people, thinking that he had been wrong to do something earlier, but now he did not intend to repeat his mistakes. There was a lot of determination in his gaze. He seemed to have made up his mind. Suddenly he heard the voices of the people who were watching the news. It turned out that the protagonist had started looking for people to build up the city, but the people were worried about whether he would be able to pay them back. The man looked at the notice and started to read it. It said that some people would be able to get an official rank. He was shocked by what he read, and then he thought about the fact that the prince thought differently than the rest of the people, and that he didn't like the church. But he also thought that he would be considered an accomplice, and simply sent to the gallows. The man began to leave. He could only hope that the prince would not respect the laws of the church. A little while later the hero and the knight were walking in the neighborhood, and the knight asked how high and wide the wall would be. Roland said that he was going to make a wall at least 5 meters high and 2 meters wide, as well as a passageway where at least 4 people could enter. The knight said that for such a building they would need to dig the ground at least a man's height. The knight said that in the best-case scenario he would not be able to complete the building until next year. The prince asked what the problem was. The knight said that for stability they would have to grind and work each stone to fit together. The protagonist said that they would be digging and building at the same time, and also said that the alchemists had invented cement which would help them a lot in their work. The protagonist went with the knight to the cement burning room. The knight inquired if cement was really made in this room. The protagonist thought about the fact that the materials were very easy to get, but there was another problem, namely that it would be difficult to match the temperature. The girl started to open the doors. The prince ordered the knight to wait outside and headed inside. Anna was waiting for him there, and the hero thought that the witch's power might help. The girl looked very confused and hid behind the door. The boy gave her some clothes and asked if the girl had succeeded. She said she hadn't let the protagonist down, and then asked if it was right. Roland said it was what he needed, but they would know for sure when they tried it. The girl wondered what it was for, and Roland told her that it was for building houses and a lot of other sustainable things. He also petted the girl and told her that she was the only one who could create such an amazing material. A little while later they went outside, after which they began to look at the stones that were bonded with cement. The knight was shocked that there was a material that could join two slabs of stone together. The protagonist was pleased with the success. The cement does the job perfectly. The knight started to try with all his might to disconnect the stones, but it didn't work. Roland asked him to be careful not to hurt his back. The knight was incredibly happy about this thing. He said that with it they could really build a wall whenever they wanted, as long as they had the stones. Roland said that there was no point in building a wall too big, because there was no point. He said that no matter how big the wall is, it won't help against the enemies inside it. The main character told about the plan to rebuild the houses of the inhabitants, so that they would not be afraid of losing their homes, because with this technology the house will be incredibly difficult to break. The guy dreamed of showing the world that witches are the ones who will help move human progress forward much faster. Inside the building, the sound of hammers could be heard, as people were crushing rocks with heavy hammers. The protagonist said that he didn't want to risk the girl's health, as it was very harmful to breathe dust all the time, so he hired people who would do it faster. The protagonist thought that in the future one Anna would not be enough. He thought that they should not be used as expendable material. The protagonist was also glad that thanks to Anna he was able to complete the creation of cement. The knight said that thanks to Roland personally showing him how to dig a trench people started working very hard. At that time the hero said that the trenches were crooked and it was more like a sewer. The protagonist thought that he needed to find a professional as soon as possible who could help him solve the construction problems. An old man came to the protagonist saying that he had news. This interested the protagonist, and the old man told him that a good mason had arrived who had been doing this for a long time. The hero was surprised that a man from a famous organization came to them, even though it does not exist now. Roland ordered to bring this man, as he needed someone like him. At that time in the office of the protagonist, he sat at the desk and looked carefully in the direction of the girl. She was reading a book with a very happy look. It seemed to be her favorite pastime. At that time, the knight brought the very man who brought up Anna. Roland ordered the man to raise his head and speak without formality. Suddenly he noticed Anna, and was simply shocked at what he saw. The hero along with the knight certainly did not expect such a thing. At that time the girl addressed the man as a teacher. At that time the protagonist ordered the knight not to let this man come out, and the knight instantly stood near the door, blocking the way to retreat. Roland was shocked at this coincidence. The random mason turned out to be an acquaintance of the witch. At that time the man fell to his knees in front of the girl and began to beg her forgiveness. The hero thought that the man was no threat to Anna, and decided to observe. At that time the girl was crying, and looked at the teacher. At that time, Roland wondered why the mason was Anna's teacher. He apologized to the prince for losing his cool, and then explained that he had once been a mason, but had become the most common teacher in the city. He also explained that Anna was the girl he taught. The hero listened attentively to the man's words that the reason why the prince kept Anna alive was not important. The most important thing was that she did not go to the gallows. The man thought that at least the prince did not believe in the rumors about witches. He hoped to give his apprentice to him as a concubine. After all, it was much better than being killed. The man began to say that he hoped that Nana, like Anna, could become the main character's concubine, because she was also sweet like Anna. The protagonist started to say that if the girl is really a witch he can guarantee her safety, and then he added that he can't take the girl away from her family so easily. Then the protagonist gave a serious look and said that he had saved Anna for the wrong reasons, while he was happy that he had managed to get another witch to work with. Roland explained that it was not about power, but about the deeds that people do, so he would not punish the girl just because she had power. After the hero decided to change the subject and asked the man if he had built the walls of Grycastle, and he said that he had. Roland told him of his plan to build the wall and appointed the man to lead the project. A little while later Nana arrived at the protagonist's house. She was shaking with fear. Then with an incredibly sweet expression on her face, she asked if she was going to die. The hero said that the girl will live as well as Anna, and then introduced himself to the girl. Nana was incredibly happy and introduced herself to the guy as well. She instantly ran towards her friend, after which they started having a nice conversation. At that time, the hero thought about the fact that Anna is only 17 years old, and how beautiful she will grow up. The hero asked if it was true that the girl had awakened the power of the witch. She thought that the prince wanted to hang her. The main character said that they hang criminals and innocent children. The girl said that she had heard that the power is awakened after meeting the devil, but she had never seen anyone like that. Anna started stroking the girl. At that time, the hero asked when exactly the girl realized that she was different from others. The girl said that a week ago she saw a bird hurt and wanted to help her very much, and then something started to come out of her hands. The protagonist was surprised and asked what happened then. She told him that the water surrounded the bird, after which the bird's wound healed. The protagonist ordered the knight to fetch a chicken, after which he went to look for the chicken. Roland thought that it might be a power that could heal. He thought that such a power would be of incredible value to people. The hero asked why the girl thought that witches were bad. She said that although the power seemed harmless, it was a demon's trap, and he repeated again that he had never seen a demon. The protagonist said that it was just a lie of the church, and the teacher became one of those who believed in this nonsense, which surprised the girl. She did not understand why the church deceives people. At that time, the protagonist turned gloomy and said that the church does it only for its own benefit. Guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end. I really enjoy reading your comments, so write something more often. If you like this manhwa, then please share your opinion. If I see that you like it, then I will keep releasing it as often as I can and eventually make a full one. It all depends on you guys. Thanks again for watching. See you all soon.